Thank you. All right, I'd like to introduce you all to John Paul. He is from Clifton Larson Allen, our external audit firm. And if John is, looks like he can share his screen, which is fantastic. He will share about the audit process. And please feel free to ask questions. John Paul, do you prefer the team to raise their hands and ask questions? I can monitor for that as you go, or would you rather they wait till the end?
Feel free to interrupt and kind of ask any questions as they come up. We do have a pretty brief agenda, so not expecting it to take too long. Again, my name is John Paul LeChevalier with Clifton Larson Allen, or CLA. Looking forward to this year's audit, and really we have, again, a couple of slides on an agenda for this meeting, but really the main purpose is mainly to introduce myself. I've been on with the audit for the last couple of years, so I might look familiar, but the main purpose of this is really to introduce myself and also let the Finance and Audit Committee know that we're starting the audit, and that if there's any questions, comments, anything you'd like to discuss, things that we should be aware of, that we're here and available and happy to have any of those conversations or take any of those questions. So that's really kind of the main thing that I want to make sure kind of that message gets across, that again, we're available, would be happy to talk through any of that. And then otherwise, we will just kind of talk through, again, a few items on the agenda, and feel free to interrupt. If there's things that make sense to discuss during this meeting, we'd be happy to have those conversations now. Again, we're available if there is something that you think would be better as a one-on-one conversation or to have separately. Please feel free. My contact information is in the slides, and so feel free to contact me after this meeting or at any point, and be happy to talk through anything that is on your mind. All right, so the scope of the audit is going to be similar to previous years. There's really kind of two main components. The first is the financial statement audit, and that is a required report that the district has to put together each year. The district has elected to present an annual comprehensive financial report, which takes those required financial statements and expands them, provides more additional information. And so that will be the subject or the main focus of the financial statement portion of the audit. The other part is what we refer to as the single audit, which is an audit over federal grants. And that's on a rotating basis of which federal awards the federal government wants us to look at. They have a formula for determining that. Based on kind of reviewing that formula for this year, we expect Title I and ESSER to be the two major programs. We'll continue to reassess if there's any changes to that, but at this point, those two programs we do expect to be part of that single audit. ESSER is considered to be a high-risk program, not just for the district, but nationwide, which means that anytime the district has more than $750,000 relating to this grant, it's going to be selected. So if you remember last year, it was selected, and it's going to continue to be selected basically until the majority of those funds have been spent. The schedule of expenditures of federal awards, that is one of the schedules that's presented within that annual comprehensive financial report. Essentially, the district has elected to report both the single audit and financial statement audit in one file altogether. And so that schedule, or the CFA as we call it, will show all of the federal awards, and that will be kind of the main focus of that single audit. And then we would have separate communication for any findings, recommendations, things that pop up during the audit, and that will be in a separate report. So the scope of the audit is really the same as it's been in previous years. Again, the single audit federal awards do rotate, but otherwise the scope is the same. We are required at the beginning of each audit to let the board as well as the Finance and Audit Committee know what our responsibilities are. This has not changed. So this reads very dryly, because this is exactly what the audit standards say is our responsibilities. I think the next slide really has kind of more of the things that I wanted to point out. is that this audit is not, the financial statements remain the responsibility of the district, having good internal controls, making sure that everything is recorded correctly, that all of the finances are moving along smoothly and in the correct trajectory. All of that remains the responsibility of the district. It's our responsibility to review the financial statements and make sure that those are materially correct based on our audit procedures. So we really kind of view that maybe a little bit more, if you think of like a book author, the district is the author and we're more the editor, the one kind of double checking that everything looks right. And if there's any issues or mistakes, that we're discussing that with the district. We do review internal controls as part of our audit procedures, but our report doesn't specifically give an opinion over the effectiveness of internal controls, basically meaning that we do consider if the district has good internal controls as part of our audit, but we're not specifically issuing an opinion over that to say yes or no, everything is exactly as it needs to be. An example of internal controls, some of the big ones would be a review over payroll processes, making sure that individuals are getting paid the appropriate amount, as well as review of disbursements. If an invoice comes in, the process for making sure that that's properly approved prior to payment. Those would be kind of two of the significant internal controls. So we do review that process, but our report is not specifically over that. One thing that I know we've discussed really almost 10 years now of discussing the net pension liability. Did want to just bring this up in advance. Based on the preliminary calculations, we do have that going from last year was presented at a little over 500 million, and this year it'll be close to 675 million. So about $170 million increase in the net pension liability. And that is basically Para's overall pension liability. If you were to carve out the little piece of that that relates to Adams 12, that would be where this net pension liability comes from. As we've talked about the last couple of years, there is a smoothing effect that governmental accounting standards have. So while there's a $170 million increase in this liability, the actual impact to the ending net position of or equity of the district is only going to be about a $13 million decrease for this year, just based on the ups and downs over the last couple of years and kind of that smoothing out effect. So you will see a decrease in the overall financial position of the district relating to the net pension liability, but not going to be nearly as significant as it initially looks. The other item to bring up is the net OPEB liability. This is also relating to Para and is a healthcare subsidy that's also provided, not nearly as significant as the net pension liability, and really it was pretty consistent with the previous year. There is a new accounting standard. So GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They released statement number 96 relating to software subscriptions. And what this does is take those software subscriptions that would normally just be paid, as those payments become due, it's recorded as an expenditure by the district, and it moves along. This new standard would require any multi-year material software subscriptions to be presented as both an asset as well as a long-term liability. So for example, say there's, and this is entirely made up, but if there is a 10-year agreement for the district's accounting system, you would take the total amount of payments that are going to be made over that 10 years, show that as a capital asset, and then also show those future payments as long-term liability on the district's financial statements. So that is a new standard for this year, and that is something that we have been engaged to assist the district with in reviewing all of those agreements. Last we looked, I think it was somewhere around 100, 150 different softwares that we're currently looking at relating to GASB 96. I'm expecting most of them not to meet this criteria, but that is something that we're in the process of assessing to make sure that that's properly recorded and disclosed for this year. In terms of the timeline, we do have a relatively similar timeline to previous years in terms of the audit committee date scheduled for January 2024. We are basically starting the audit right around now. We are hoping to have everything completed earlier than, I know last year with the staffing turnover issues at the district, that was later than normal. So we're hoping to get back on track this year with everything completed around the end of October is the goal. And then similar to previous years, in order to make the audit go smoothly, we want to make sure that we're communicating with the district. Any issues that we're seeing, we'll be communicating as soon as we see them and discuss them internally. Any issues that the district is having, make sure that they're communicating with me. And then, really that communication being key, and then sticking to the timeline, making sure that we're getting everything wrapped up and completed timely for this year's audit. And then again, that last point is really the focus of this meeting. If there is any issues, discussion items, things that you'd like to bring to our attention, please feel free to reach out at any point. We'd be happy to discuss that. So at this point, that is all of the items that I had. So, and I'll pause and open the floor if there's any questions, comments, other discussion items.
John Paul, this is Mike Chow. Just a quick question, maybe follow up for another time, but I was struck by how large the increase in the net pension liability. It's like a 33% increase in 1 year. Maybe, is it change in benefits? Is it large, increases in just the cost of healthcare? It just seemed like a very large increase in 1 year.
Sure. So the biggest part of that change is really the, at least for this past year, and I should say this is their valuation has a pretty big lag from when PARA calculates that to what actually gets shown on the financial statements for the district. So PARA's calculations they're based on an actuarial study. In this case, it'll be as of 2021, and then they roll that forward to 2022. So this is really the end of 2022. That is that kind of information is being presented for the district, and it was big investment losses by PARA, basically just the market being not in a good place at that point. So that would be kind of the main reason for the increase in the net pension liability. One of the other significant things is that the state did make an additional direct distribution to PARA. So rather than increase the contributions that are required and also increase the revenue that goes to everyone, the state did make a direct payment to PARA to try and decrease that pension liability, though again, with the investment losses, it was an increase in the liability that'll be presented for this year. And I know that could be probably another multi-hour discussion, and that's kind of what PARA discusses. And I guess the other main point is that the district doesn't have any control over this liability. It really, to me, is almost more informational than an actual, anything that the district can do about that, other than, talking to PARA or legislators. There's really nothing that the district can do to control what liability is presented there.
John Paul,
Okay, that's helpful.
Oh, sorry. John Paul, would you share a little bit about the actual liability the district has with this entry that we're required to make on our statements? we have several new members to the committee, and while we've been talking about this for 10 years, I think it's a
Sure.
good note to have.
Sure. So the way that this is calculated, basically para has a couple different divisions. The district is part of the school division, and what they'll do is calculate, they'll hire an actuary. The actuary will calculate how long they expect individuals to live, how many individuals will remain employed for however long. They make a whole lot of assumptions about what amounts will be contributed, what benefits will be paid out, what investment gains or losses will be coming in the future. They take all of the future benefit payments, less the expected incoming contributions and investment income, and the benefits, future benefits minus the income and contributions is going to be the total net pension, total pension liability that that para is presenting. And then the district presents it. Basically, you take the proportion of that that the district's employer contributions are. So say if, and I'm just going to use easy math to make this simpler, if the district is contributing $1 million a year to para and there's 100 million in contributions during the year, then the district would have 1% of that net pension liability. So you take that number multiplied by 1% to determine what that net pension liability is. And then again, that's the easy math. And then you take that smoothing effect, and there's a whole lot more calculations that go into how that's going to be amortized or kind of smoothed out over multiple years. But the net pension liability, that one big number, is relatively easy to take, just multiplying the percentage that the district is of the total school division, and that's what gets presented. So as you can kind of see from what the math is, the district wouldn't have any control over how much para is going to be required to pay out in future years. That liability is not something that the district could pay down, even if it wanted to. That's just what's going to be coming in the future. And most of the time, when you get to that point, the question is, well, then why is it even being presented? It's presented because, number one, it's required. That's what the governing accounting standard setters said. Yes, this needs to be presented as a liability. And the logic behind it is that that liability, if para is going to be able to make these future benefit payments, that is eventually going to trickle through to the district through increased contributions or decreased benefits. In some way, it's going to come back to the employers that are part of the pension plan, if those benefits are ever going to get paid out. So it's a very long-term liability, and not something that the district would write a check for, but would expect to come through really in other ways in future years.
John Paul, I appreciate that explanation. I just, maybe to boil it down for those of us that are really new, if there's a 33% increase in the liability, does that mean the district's contribution to that liability, whatever it was last year, we should expect it to be 33% higher this year? Or is the funding mechanism for that separate from the district budget?
Yes. So that liability is calculated entirely independent of the contributions. Those are set at a percentage of salaries. So, and it's right around 20%. So 20% of the salaries being paid, that's what gets contributed. Whether there's an increase in the net pension liability, a decrease, even if it flips to a net pension asset, if it's slightly overfunded, that contribution mechanism is going to remain exactly the same unless there's some type of change at para and what their contributions are going to be, which again would, they'd factor in what they're expecting to see in the future, but that's not going to be, it's not a direct correlation. And I should say that while you're seeing this significant decrease, there was actually significant increase over the last 2 years. And increase, meaning it's the net pension liability decreased very significantly the last 2 years. And so things were trending, in a very positive direction. And now there's kind of this decrease back to a less positive place based on really that investment income and where those investments were sitting at the end of 2022.
Hi, this is Laura. I just wanted to make a couple comments as a board member. Mike, and it's really good that you're picking up on this. And the fact that it really doesn't calculate into our gains and losses over the year, and we really don't do it. That number is something to be aware of, but there, as a board in a school district, there really isn't much we can do. Where it really comes into play is it's very important for our taxpayers in our state and everyone in our state to understand this liability against being able to pay our teachers what we're promising in their retirement benefits. And this has been going on for years, as John Paul mentioned. It's very political because it's been allowed to grow and grow. It's sort of like, if you think of it like Social Security, it's the same kind of thing. At some point, you're going to have to come up with that money to pay our retirees that we've promised. And the problem is that, just a few years ago, there was a lot of work in the legislature to try to get this number back. There's a long history about how we got this much debt, and watching how that money is managed by the para board, to me, is something that people should really be interested in and be following, because that's the only way we're going to change that number, and making sure that they're making safe and balanced investments with that money. And also the pieces that how we got in the state, and people can talk about whether it was state investment or teachers paying in or districts paying in. There is a piece of our teacher's salary that goes to pay para. There's part of our district budget that goes to contribute to para, and those numbers change based on how we're doing. And so at some point they can come back and say, we're going to give a pay increase to our teachers, but a percentage of that gets set on how much that has to go to para. And the state can say, okay, well, we're going to make the teacher contribution, 1% of this, and the district 3%, but the district will have to make a decision on if we really are going to pass that increase on to our teachers, or we're going to take it out of our budget and say we're going to pay it. And there's been negotiations like that all along, because it's you give your teachers a raise, but then you mandate that part of it has to go to their health benefits and part of it has to go to their para. So that's where these numbers, and watching what the state is doing. The state had agreed to make some pretty big chunks of payment back into para to try to bring that number down. And that's what John Paul was saying. They made another payment this year. And are there any more payments left for them to make in the agreement right now, John Paul?
Yes, it's actually set up that they recently changed it, but it was about $225 million each year that they're paying directly into para. They skipped one of the payments when COVID first started, and then they made an additional payment this year and I should say this year, but really it was last July, or maybe it was May, the additional payment that was made. So that the timing of that is shifted a little bit just due to that one suspended payment. And they did increase this payment, and then the future payments will be decreased based on how. So they added some complications to it, but overall it was about $225 million, and that's set until, unless they change their mind or until para is fully funded. So that is expected to continue into the future.
And so the one that John Paul's talking about this year, because they skipped that payment, the legislators worked really hard and they're trying to make up for not making that payment, the interest that would have been earned on that money. So they made a little extra payment out of this past year's state budget to try to help make up for that. It's really complicated, but as far as our district budget goes, again, like John Paul's saying, it's not directly, that liability isn't directly to us, but it definitely impacts, possibly future contributions to para that come on an annual basis to us from the state. And also making sure that the legislature continues to make those bulk payments that can continue to bring that down. And hopefully the stock market will, be more stable. And I hope that helps.
Laura,
Sorry.
that's super helpful. Yeah, no, I guess, yeah, that's super helpful. I appreciate the context. I guess, the nature of defined benefit plans is obviously, as people live longer, medical costs go up, investment assets go down, that liability increases. I guess what I'm taking away from you guys is that our contribution as a district to it is really decided at a level that is not part of our budgeting process, that is decided at a state level or another funding mechanism. We're not individually as a district determining what we should contribute to para. That's a larger scale decision.
Yeah, either when the state makes a change into the contributions of the districts and the educators, or these payments, at the bigger para board handling of the money. It really is outside our control, but it's important to us as citizens to make sure that we're going to get out of this and we're going to fully fund this and make sure that the money is there to come through on the promise that we've made.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions about the audit process, the work that John Paul and his team does, the work the finance team does? Any questions on that?
Just one more question on that front. Periodically throughout the audit, John Paul, do you and your team give updates to the FAC, or is it really just at the end of the process where we get a download of what you guys are doing?
It historically has been at the beginning and at the end. We normally we'll schedule a meeting with one member, and we've kind of rotated through of the board or the finance and audit committee, just to get their thoughts. And so we kind of rotate through that, but otherwise it hasn't been something that we've been giving periodic updates. If that's requested, we'd be happy to do that. And obviously if there was anything very significant, any significant concerns, then we would bring that up earlier. But that would be, the sky is falling type of things would be, not an adjustment or a slight issue here or there that we can work through directly with the district.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Paul, you looked like you had a question.
No, actually, Mike covered that one, so that was good.
Anyone else? Trying to go through and make sure I can see everyone if they're raising their hand or not. All right. Well, John Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. Great information, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time. And again, if there's any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next topic, we briefly talked about it last week at our intro meeting. The FAC is presenting the external monitoring report, the culmination of what new members will be working on for the next year, but presenting last year's report to the board at our October 4th board meeting. Right now we have Kelly, who I think couldn't be here today. She has volunteered to present, and Venus or Raina, I know Kathy's out of town, so I'm not singling her out or unavailable to attend. Venus or Raina, would you be available to present with Kelly so she's not up there by herself? Any chance?
Which week was that?
It's October 4th. It's a Wednesday.
Let me double check.
While you're checking that, we're done with the formal part of the board meeting. We're doing work now.